The call came on a Tuesday, exactly 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days after they left me for dead. You'd think a decade would dull the edges of a memory that sharp, but some betrayals are etched so deep they become part of your DNA. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a specialist in rare hematological disorders. Most days I save lives, or at least I fight like hell to. It's a good life, a successful one, built on the ashes of what they tried to burn down. 10 years ago, I wasn't Dr. Jennifer, the respected expert. I was just Jennifer, Chloe's younger sister, the inconvenient one. Chloe, my older sister, the golden child, was about to have the wedding of the century, or so they planned. 2 weeks before the big day, my body decided to stage its own dramatic event. It started with a fatigue so profound I could barely lift my head, then the fevers, the bruising that appeared like angry ghosts on my skin. I remember trying to explain it to my mother, Mary, her face tight with annoyance. Jennifer, honestly, not now. Chloe has her final dress fitting. Mom, I think something's really wrong, I'd whispered, leaning against the kitchen counter for support. Her eyes, so like mine, yet so cold, scanned me. You're just stressed, probably trying to get attention because it's all about Chloe for once. The accusation hung in the air, heavier than the scent of lilies she'd ordered for the reception. My father, Edgar, just nodded in agreement, already picturing the bills for the wedding, I suppose. Any deviation was a threat to their perfect picture. When I collapsed at the rehearsal dinner right as Chloe was showing off her diamond bracelet from her fiancé, Kelvin, that's when they truly showed their colors. She's faking it, Chloe hissed loud enough for half the room to hear, her face flushed with fury, not concern. She's always been jealous. She's trying to ruin my wedding. My mother rushed to Chloe's side, cooing reassurances. My father helped the ushers move me to a side room, not to a hospital. You're making a scene, Jennifer, he'd muttered, his jaw clenched. They left me there. Literally. Someone, a distant cousin, I think, eventually called an ambulance after I started season. The doctors at the local hospital were baffled. My parents, when they finally showed up hours later, after the dinner was over and Chloe was safely tucked away, told the staff I was prone to dramatics. They signed the consent forms for the initial exploratory procedures with an air of profound inconvenience, then announced they had to get back to wedding preparations. They couldn't possibly postpone. Think of the guests, the expense. I remember the blur of terrified nurses, the clanging of machines, the searing pain. Then the diagnosis, a rare, aggressive autoimmune disorder attacking my blood cells. I needed immediate specialized treatment, a risky bone marrow transplant. My family? They sent a florist card to the ICU. Get well soon. So sorry you're missing the big day. Chloe's wedding went ahead, a lavish, joyous affair, I later heard. I spent it fighting for my life alone. The surgery, the recovery, it was a lonely, terrifying hell. But I survived. I clawed my way back, fueled by a cold, hard rage and an absolute refusal to be broken by them. I threw myself into my studies, then my career, driven by a need to understand the very thing that nearly killed me and to ensure no one else felt that kind of abandonment. Now, my office overlooks the city, a testament to how far I've come. My research is groundbreaking. Hospitals consult me. I have a life, friends, respect. My friend and colleague Lucia is the only one who knows the full ugly story. The first call that Tuesday was from Wyatt, an old colleague from my residency. He was now a lead consultant at a major hospital a few states over. Jen, got a real puzzle here, he said, his voice tinny over the speakerphone. Young woman, early 30s, sudden onset, aggressive, looks like a severe aplastic anemia, but with some very unusual markers. Nothing standard is touching it. Honestly, your name came up. Your research into atypical immune responses. Send me the file, Wyatt, I said, my voice calm, professional. Will do. Listen, the family's desperate. They'll probably be reaching out to you directly. Name's Chloe. Chloe Shaw, married name, maiden name, Bell. My blood ran cold. Bell, of course. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I see, I managed, keeping my tone even. Thanks for the heads up, Wyatt. I hung up, my hand hovering over the receiver. Chloe, my sister. The irony was almost suffocating. For a moment, the cool, competent Dr. Jennifer vanished, and I was that terrified girl in the ICU, again, the ghost of her pain whispering in my ear. The phone rang again, almost immediately, as if on cue. Caller ID flashed, unknown number. I knew. I just knew. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice deliberately devoid of emotion. Dr. Jennifer Bell speaking. A choked sob on the other end. Jennifer? Oh, Jennifer, thank God. It's Mom. It's Mary. Her voice trembled, laced with the desperation I recognized all too well, the desperation of someone whose perfect world was crumbling. We need to see you. It's Chloe. She's very sick. I leaned back in my leather chair, a slow, cold smile touching my lips, a smile that wouldn't have reached my eyes even if she could see me. My heart, which I thought had been successfully encased in ice where they were concerned, gave a painful throb, not of sympathy, but of something else, something akin to grim satisfaction. Yes, Mother, I said, my voice like a shard of glass. I've been expecting your call. My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m., I said, and hung up before she could unleash the floodgates. No tearful pleas over the phone. If they wanted something from me, they would come to my territory on my terms. The next morning, Lucia poked her head into my office. Big day? She asked, a knowing look in her eyes. I just nodded. You could say that. Want me to run interference or sit in, moral support or human shield? I appreciated the offer. Lucia was a rock. Thanks, but this is a solo performance. All right, she said. Just buzz if you need an emergency patient to call you away. I managed a small smile. Will do. At precisely 10 a.m., my assistant buzzed. Dr. Bell of Mary, Edgar, and Kelvin are here to see you. Send them in, I replied, my voice betraying none of the storm brewing inside me. They shuffled in, a pathetic little parade of misery. Mary looked like she'd aged 20 years, not 10. Her once perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled, her expensive clothes rumpled. Edgar, always a man of few words and even fewer convictions, seemed smaller, his shoulders slumped. And then there was Kelvin, Chloe's husband. He looked tired, scared, and deeply uncomfortable, his eyes darting around my spacious modern office as if looking for an escape route. He was the only one who met my gaze directly, a flicker of something shame in his expression. Mary rushed forward, hands outstretched. Jennifer! Oh, my dear girl! I remained seated behind my large mahogany desk, gesturing to the chairs opposite me. Please, sit. My tone was polite, distant, the kind I use with pharmaceutical reps trying to sell me on their latest miracle drug. She faltered, her hands dropping to her sides. They sat, a miserable trio. Thank you for seeing us, Jennifer. Edgar mumbled, his voice raspy. It's good to see you looking so well. Is it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The air crackled. You could have cut the tension with a scalpel. Mary burst into tears then, a practiced theatrical display. Oh, Jennifer, we were so wrong, so wrong. We were terrible parents, terrible people. Can you ever forgive us? I let her cry. I studied my fingernails, perfectly manicured. Forgiveness? They were about a decade too late and a whole universe of sincerity short. It's Chloe. Kelvin finally said, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through Mary's sobs. Dr. Fuller said you might be the only one who can help. She's at University Hospital. They don't know what to do." "I read Dr. Fuller's preliminary notes," I stated, my gaze shifting to him. He seemed the most grounded, the most genuinely concerned for Chloe rather than for their own skins. "Her condition is complex and aggressive," he said. "Your research, your connections," Edgar began, then trailed off, looking helpless. "My research is highly specialized," I confirmed. "And yes, I have connections to experimental treatment programs that are not widely available." Hope flared in Mary's eyes. She lunged forward again, metaphorically this time. "Then you'll help her? You'll save our Chloe?" "Family helps family, Jennifer," Edgar added, a weak attempt at invoking a bond that they themselves had severed. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. I watched them squirm. It was a small, petty satisfaction, but damn, it felt earned. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice low and steady, each word carefully chosen. "What happened 10 years ago was not a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake made in the heat of the moment. It was a deliberate, conscious choice on all your parts to abandon me when I was critically ill, because my illness was inconvenient for Chloe's wedding." Mary flinched as if struck. Edgar looked down at his hands. Kelvin just watched me, his expression unreadable. "You accuse me of faking a life-threatening condition to spoil a party," I continued, my voice still even, but with an undercurrent of steel they couldn't miss. "You left me alone to face what could very well have been my death." We know," Mary wailed. "We've lived with the guilt every day." Lived with the guilt? Or lived with the inconvenience of having a daughter they disowned suddenly become a topic of hushed gossip? I suspected the latter. "So, when you come here now expecting me to simply step in and save Chloe because we share DNA," I said, "you need to understand that my willingness to even consider it is not a given. It is not an obligation." Kelvin spoke. "We understand, Jennifer, or at least I'm beginning to. What do you need from us?" His directness was almost refreshing. Mary and Edgar just looked terrified. I held his gaze. "I might be able to guide her care. I might be able to leverage my work to open a door for potential treatment. There are no guarantees. Her condition is severe." I paused, letting that sink in. "And if I do decide to help, it will not be simple, and it certainly will not be unconditional." Their faces, already pale, seemed to lose another shade of color. Mary opened her mouth, then closed it again. Edgar just stared. I leaned forward slightly. "I'll consider it," I said, the words dropping like stones into a silent pool. "But my help comes with conditions, conditions you may find difficult to accept." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Mary's ragged breathing. Their expressions shifted from desperate hope to dawning dread. Oh, yes, this was going to be interesting. "Conditions?" Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. "What kind of conditions?" I looked at each of them in turn, savoring the fear in their eyes. It was a cold, bitter kind of satisfaction, but it was satisfaction none the less. "Before I even agree to review Chloe's complete medical file, before I make a single call or consult on her case in any official capacity, I require something from each of you." Edgar shifted in his seat. "Money? Is that it? We'll pay whatever it costs." I almost laughed. Did they really think this was about money? "Oh, it will cost you, Edgar, but not in the way you think. Not yet, anyway." I leaned back, steepling my fingers. "I require a written confession from each of you, Mary, Edgar, and Chloe." Kelvin frowned. "Chloe? She can barely speak. She's incredibly weak." "Then you can take dictation, Kelvin," I said, my gaze unwavering. I wanted in her words, however faltering, If she's well enough to understand her life is on the line, she's well enough to contribute. A confession? Mary stammered. About what? About everything, I said, my voice hardening. I want a detailed account of what you did 10 years ago. I want you to write down that you accused me of faking my illness. I want you to admit you prioritized a wedding over my life. I want you to explain why you did it. Your selfishness, your belief I was an attention seeker, your embarrassment, whatever pathetic justifications you clung to. And I want you to detail the impact you believe your actions had on me. They stared at me, aghast. You'd think I'd ask them to donate their own organs on the spot. That's cruel, Jennifer, Mary choked out. To make us dredge all that up now when Chloe is cruel. I cut her off, my voice dangerously soft. Cruel as leaving your child to potentially die alone while you toast champagne glasses. This is merely asking for an honest accounting, a prerequisite, non-negotiable. Edgar looked like he was going to be sick. And if we do this, you'll help? If you do this, I corrected, I will read Chloe's full medical chart. I will assess if my expertise and connections could offer a viable path. That is all I am committing to at this stage. Kelvin ran a hand over his face. We don't have time for this, Jennifer. She's fading. You should have thought about time 10 years ago, Kelvin, I said, though my tone was less harsh with him. He was, after all, collateral damage in their past sins. You have 24 hours to get those confessions to my office, typed, signed. They left in a daze, Mary leaning heavily on Edgar, Kelvin walking stiffly beside them, his face a mask of strain. I watched them go, a grim sense of purpose settling over me. This was just the first turn of the screw. Later that afternoon, my private line rang. It was Mary. Jennifer, darling, she began, her voice thick with forced sweetness and unshed tears. Your father and I were writing. It's just so painful to relive it. I imagine it is, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. We made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. We were under so much pressure with the wedding, and you were always a sensitive child, prone to episodes. There it was, the subtle shift of blame, the insinuation that I was somehow inherently difficult, that my personality had contributed to their monstrous behavior. My fingers tightened around the pen I was holding. Are you suggesting, Mary, I asked, my voice dropping to an icy calm, that my sensitivity or any episodes I may have had as a child justified your actions? No, no, of course not, dear, she said quickly, a little too quickly. I just mean it was a confusing time. We weren't thinking clearly. You seemed to be thinking perfectly clearly when you told the hospital staff I was a hysteric and then left to go to a party, I countered. My memory of that part is crystal clear. Is yours? A choked sob. You're being so hard on us, Jennifer. Can't you see we're suffering? Chloe is suffering. Don't you have any compassion? Compassion? I echoed the word as if it were foreign. I learned about compassion in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by strangers while my family celebrated. You'll forgive me if my definition differs from yours. 23 hours left, Mary. I hung up. Her attempt at manipulation had backfired spectacularly. Any lingering, microscopic shred of doubt I might have harbored about the righteousness of my path was incinerated. They hadn't changed. They were still just trying to manage the fallout, to minimize their own discomfort. The next morning, a courier delivered a thick envelope. Inside were 3 documents. I read them slowly, methodically. Mary's was full of self-pity and blame-shifting, wrapped in flowery apologies. Edgar's was terse, factual, almost detached, as if describing a business deal gone wrong. Chloe's, dictated to Kelvin, was weak, rambling, and mostly focused on how scared she was. But they had, in their own flawed ways, admitted to the core facts. They had written down the ugly truth, or at least parts of it. I called Kelvin. I have them. And, he asked, his voice strained, will you help her now? Will you look at her file? I paused and letting him hang for a moment. The satisfaction was a cold, sharp thing. This is a start, I said, my voice unreadable, but it's not nearly enough. I could almost hear his heart sink through the phone. Kelvin's silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Not enough? He finally managed, his voice tight with disbelief and a rise in panic I could practically taste. What else could you possibly want, Jennifer? We wrote it all down. We confessed. You confessed privately, I corrected, my tone cool and precise. To me. That's a good first step in acknowledging the truth, I suppose. But the damage you did wasn't private. The humiliation I endured wasn't private. Your betrayal had an audience. What are you saying? Edgar's voice suddenly cut in, rough and angry. He must have snatched the phone from Kelvin. What more do you want from us? I could hear Mary weeping in the background, a soundtrack to their desperation. Good. Let them feel a fraction of the despair I'd lived with for years. Chloe's condition is deteriorating, isn't it? I asked, not unkindly, but as a statement of fact. I'd already had a brief professional call with Wyatt Fuller that morning. He'd painted a grim picture. Time was indeed running out. Yes, Kelvin said, his voice returning strained. She's weaker. They're talking about palliative options if something doesn't change soon. The fear in his voice was genuine. For him at least this was solely about Chloe. Then let's not waste any more time, I said. My primary condition for intervening in Chloe's care, for potentially giving her a chance she otherwise wouldn't have, is this. You will make a public admission of your actions. A stunned silence. Then an explosion from Edgar. A public admission? Are you insane? Far from it, Edgar, I replied calmly. I'm merely seeking a symmetry of experience. You publicly shamed me by implication when you carried on with that wedding while I was fighting for my life. You allowed, no, and encouraged people to believe I was a malicious, attention-seeking liar. Now you will publicly set the record straight. How public? Mary choked out, her sobs momentarily ceasing, replaced by a new, sharper terror. I want a full-page apology, I stated, each word deliberate, published in your local community newspaper, the one that covered Chloe's wedding so extensively 10 years ago, complete with glossy photos of the happy couple and proud parents. And I want that same apology drafted as a letter and sent to every single guest who attended that wedding. I still have the original invitation list, you know. I kept it as a souvenir. You could hear a pin drop. The sheer audacity of my demand hung in the air. I could picture their faces, pale and horrified. Oh, the satisfaction was exquisite. But that's not all, I continued, my voice relentless. Actions speak louder than words, even published ones. You will establish a charitable foundation in my name, the Jennifer Bell Foundation for Patients Abandoned During Medical Crises. A foundation? Edgar spluttered. Funded by whom? By you, of course, I said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The initial endowment will be substantial. Let's say the equivalent cost of Chloe's wedding, adjusted for inflation, plus a generous supplement reflecting your comfortable lifestyle over the past decade. My lawyers will draw up the specifics. This foundation will provide financial and emotional support to patients who find themselves in situations like mine, alone, terrified, and discarded by those who should have protected them. The silence on their end was so profound I wondered if they'd fainted. Then Kelvin spoke, his voice hoarse. Jennifer, Chloe, she asked me to ask you. She's terrified. She wants to know if you really hate her that much. Hate? It was such a simplistic word for the complex, festering wound Chloe had helped inflict. Hate is an emotion, Kelvin, I said. This is about consequences. It's about justice. Chloe was not a passive bystander. She actively participated in my vilification. She chose her perfect day over her sister's life. Does she regret it now that her own life hangs in the balance? I suppose we'll find out. Edgar finally found his voice a roar of pure fury. You're a monster, a vindictive, hateful monster. This isn't justice, it's torture. You'd let your own sister die over this? Over some perceived slight from a decade ago? The accusation, so predictable, so typical of their inability to grasp the magnitude of their actions, barely registered. I let out a slow breath. Perceived slight, I repeated, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You left your own daughter, your own sister, to face a terrifying, life-threatening illness alone, Edgar. You dismissed her agony as a bid for attention. You prioritized a party. We all make our choices, Father. I used the word father deliberately, twisting the knife just a little. You made yours then. Now it's your turn to make another one. Choose wisely. Chloe's life depends on it. I hung up, leaving them to stew in the poison of their own making. The ball was in their court. Let them sweat. Let them understand finally what it felt like to have their world held hostage by someone else's whim. The next 48 hours were, I imagine, pure hell for them. I didn't contact them, and they didn't contact me. I focused on my work, reviewed other cases, consulted with colleagues, but a small, dark part of my mind was constantly tuned to their frequency, imagining the arguments, the recriminations, the sheer panic. Lucia found me staring out my office window late the next evening. You okay? She asked. Concern etched on her face. Define okay, I said with a wry smile. Heard anything? Silence. Deafening silence. They're probably tearing each other apart, Lucia mused. Mary must be apoplectic about the public apology. Edgar, the money. And Kelvin, I added, is probably just desperate to save his wife, caught between a rock and a very hard place. And Chloe? I shrugged. Chloe is likely terrified, as she should be. The call, when it came, was from Kelvin. His voice was raw, exhausted. Jennifer, we need to talk. I'm listening, Kelvin. It's chaos here, he admitted. Mary is beside herself. She keeps saying this will ruin them, that everyone will know. Edgar's trying to figure out how to hide assets, I think. He sounded disgusted. They're more worried about their reputation and their bank account than about Chloe. That sounds familiar, I said dryly. Look, he sighed. I'm not defending them. What they did to you, I'm only just grasping the full extent of it. It's monstrous. But Chloe, she's fading, Jennifer. Every hour we delay. Have they agreed to my terms? I cut him off. A pause. Not yet. Mary is the main holdout on the public apology. Edgar is balking at the foundation amount. They're trying to negotiate. There is no negotiation, Kelvin. The terms are fixed. He was silent for a moment. Then, Chloe wants to talk to you. Or rather, she left you a message. She's too weak for full conversation. Can I play it for you? My curiosity, despite myself, was piqued. Go ahead. He fumbled with his phone, then Chloe's voice, thin and reedy, filled the line. It was a voice note, breathless and punctuated by coughs. Jennifer! It's Chloe. A long pause, a rasping breath. I know what you want, and I deserve it. I was a coward. I was so caught up in myself. I should have. I should have stood up for you, to Mom and Dad. I was scared. Scared of them, scared of ruining my perfect wedding. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry, Jen. I truly am, for what it's worth. But please, please don't let me die because of it. I'm so scared." It was a pathetic plea, still centered on her own fear, her own survival. But then her voice dropped conspiratorial, and a new chilling layer was added to their decade-old betrayal. There's there's something else, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Something I never told you. The night you collapsed. After they took you to that little room, I overheard Mom and Dad talking. Dad was complaining about the extra expense of your bridesmaid dress, your hotel room, Mom said. Mom said maybe your illness was a blessing in disguise, that it would save them some money right before the wedding. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. A blessing in disguise. My near death experience, a cost saving measure for their precious wedding. The sheer, unadulterated callousness of it stole my breath. All these years I thought it was about embarrassment, about not wanting their perfect image tarnished. But this was a level of cold-blooded cruelty I hadn't even imagined. Chloe's voice note ended with a series of ragged coughs. Kelvin came back on the line, his voice subdued. "Jennifer, did you hear that?" "I heard it," I said, my own voice flat, devoid of the cold fury that was now coursing through my veins. Any flicker of doubt, any microscopic consideration of mercy was utterly extinguished. They were worse than I thought, so much worse. She thought you should know," Kelvin said lamely. "Yes, it was illuminating," I replied. "Tell me, Kelvin, does Chloe being a blessing in disguise factor into their current financial objections?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. To ensure they understood I wasn't bluffing about my capabilities, and to give Chloe a sliver of hope that might push them over the edge, I made a call to Wyatt Fuller. I gave him a very specific, nuanced suggestion for a minor adjustment to Chloe's current supportive care, something to address a secondary symptom, not a cure, but enough to perhaps buy a little time to show I could indeed make a difference. Wyatt called back a few hours later. "Jen, that was remarkable. Her fever's down a point and her breathing is a fraction easier. It's not a fix, but it's the first positive sign we've seen in days. How did you—" "Just a hunch based on atypical presentations," I said. "Keep me updated." The next morning Kelvin called again. His voice was strained, defeated. "They'll do it," he said without preamble. "Mary, Edgar, they've agreed to all your terms, the apology, the foundation, everything." He paused, then added, his voice cracking, "Just, please, Jennifer, save her." I felt a grim tightening in my chest. Victory, or the first taste of it. "Send me their written confirmation, signed by all three of them, including Chloe's mark, if she can't sign, witnessed by you. Then we'll talk about next steps." The signed agreement arrived by midday, a scanned document emailed by a frantic Kelvin. Mary's signature was a spidery scrawl, Edgar's surprisingly firm, as if he'd resigned himself to the inevitable. Chloe's was a faint, shaky X, with Kelvin's signature as witness beneath it. It was done. They had capitulated. "All right, Kelvin," I said over the phone, the document displayed on my monitor. "Here's what happens next. I have a legal team. They specialize in this sort of thing. Public statements, foundation setups. They're very good and very discreet until I tell them not to be." "Lawyers?" Kelvin sounded even more exhausted, if that were possible. "Of course, lawyers," I replied. "This needs to be ironclad. The wording of the public apology will be precise. It will be drafted by my team based on the confessions you provided, and it will be approved by me. There will be no wiggle room, no softened language. It will state the unvarnished truth of your family's actions and their consequences for me." I could hear him swallow hard. "And the foundation?" "My lawyers will also handle the establishment of the Jennifer Bell Foundation. They will determine the exact initial endowment figure based on my instructions regarding the wedding costs and your family's financial standing. It will be a significant sum, Kelvin, enough to make a real difference for many people, and enough to be a constant public reminder. Understood, he said, his voice flat. I will also need full unrestricted access to all of Chloe's medical records immediately, and I will need to speak with her primary care team at University Hospital. I have a potential avenue for treatment, something experimental, groundbreaking. It's high risk, high reward, and it involves a specialized team that I have a unique connection with. But it's her only real shot, from what I can tell. A flicker of hope, raw and desperate, in his voice. You really think you can help her? I think there's a chance. I can get her into a program that might help her, I corrected. There are no guarantees in medicine, Kelvin, especially not at this stage. But I will make the necessary introductions and facilitate the consultation, provided your family fulfills their end of the bargain to my complete satisfaction. The next few days were a blur of activity, all orchestrated by me. My legal team, led by a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, descended upon the task with terrifying efficiency. Drafts of the public apology flew back and forth via encrypted email. Financial investigators, with my parents' reluctant consent, coerced by the ticking clock of Chloe's illness, began assessing their assets for the foundation. I saw my parents only once during this period, via a brief video call set up by Ms. Albright to confirm some details. They looked like ghosts. Mary's eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, her face puffy. Edgar was gaunt, his usual bluster completely gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed resignation. They barely spoke, just nodded and mumbled responses to Ms. Albright's crisp questions. They looked broken. Good. The grim satisfaction I felt was undeniable. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, a feeling of power reclaimed, of scales being forcibly balanced. But beneath it a strange, unexpected emptiness began to stir, this intricate, perfectly executed revenge. What would be left when it was all over? Lucia caught me staring into my coffee cup one morning, a rare moment of stillness in the whirlwind. You're really going through with all of it, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. I nodded, every last detail. How are you doing, Jen? She asked, her gaze searching. This has to be taking a toll. I'm in control, Lucia, I assured her, perhaps a little too quickly. This is what I've wanted, what I've needed for 10 years, to make them accountable, to make them understand. And will they? Understand, I mean? They'll understand the consequences, I said. Whether they ever truly grasp the depth of their cruelty, that's debatable, but they will pay, and the world will know why. She just nodded slowly. Be careful, Jen. Revenge is a double-edged sword. I'm well aware, I said. But was I? The final version of the public apology was approved. It was brutal. It detailed their accusations, their abandonment, my solitary fight for life, all in stark, unapologetic terms. It named names. It confessed their shame. Ms. Albright confirmed it was scheduled to be published online on the local newspaper's website at 8 a.m. the next morning, and would appear in the print edition delivered simultaneously. The letters to the wedding guests were stamped and ready for mailing, to be sent the moment the online version went live. The foundation charter was drafted, the initial endowment sum calculated, a figure that made even me blink, though I didn't let Ms. Albright see it. That evening I had a final call with Kelvin, Mary, and Edgar. Chloe was too weak to participate, but Kelvin assured me she was aware of the impending events. The apology goes live at 8 a.m. tomorrow, I stated, my voice even. Once I have confirmation that it is published and that the letters are in the mail, I will initiate Chloe's transfer to the specialized unit. The team there is prepped and waiting for my final go-ahead. Silence. Then Mary's voice, a mere whisper. Tomorrow. Yes, Mother, I said. the words still tasting like ash in my mouth. Tomorrow the world will know the truth. I hung up, the silence in my own apartment suddenly deafening. The eve of reckoning, and I, Jennifer, was the conductor of this very particular orchestra of ruin and potential salvation. The clock on my laptop ticked over to 8 a.m. I had the local newspaper's website open, my finger hovering over the refresh button. I clicked, and there it was. A public apology from the Bell family. The headline was stark, unadorned. Beneath it, the text I had meticulously overseen, every word a carefully placed stone in the edifice of their humiliation. It detailed their grievous error in judgment, their unconscionable abandonment of their daughter and sister Jennifer during her severe medical crisis 10 years prior. It confessed to prioritizing Chloe's wedding over my urgent medical needs, to falsely accusing Jennifer of feigning illness for attention, and to the profound and lasting trauma their actions had inflicted. It was all there in black and white for the entire community, their friends, their colleagues, their acquaintances, to see. My phone, which I'd placed on the desk beside me, began to buzz almost immediately. Kelvin. It's live, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and horror. My God, Jennifer, it's exactly as you said. The letters to the wedding guests? I asked, my voice calm. In the mail. I dropped them at the main post office myself an hour ago. Good. I took a steadying breath. Then I will make the call. I disconnected from Kelvin and dialed the number for Dr. Armitage, head of the specialized cellular therapy unit 3 states away. Dr. Armitage, Jennifer Bell, we're green for transport. Chloe Shaw. All arrangements are in place on your end? Ready and waiting, Dr. Bell, Armitage's crisp professional voice replied. We'll take good care of her. Your preliminary consults have been invaluable. Thank you, I said. She's a complex case, but if anyone can help her, it's your team. As I hung up, my personal mobile, a number very few people had, began to ring. An unfamiliar local area code. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. The fallout was beginning. I turned on the video call link Kelvin had set up in Chloe's pre-transport room at University Hospital. Mary and Edgar were there, huddled together, looking utterly destroyed. Mary was openly weeping, her face buried in Edgar's shoulder. Edgar stared blankly ahead, his expression one of complete desolation. Chloe was propped up on pillows, pale and gaunt, an oxygen tube in her nose, but her eyes were wide, fixed on the tablet screen showing the newspaper article Kelvin held up. Their phones, I could see, were lighting up incessantly on a nearby table. The community was reacting, shock, disbelief, condemnation. You can't make this stuff up. The sheer delicious irony of their carefully constructed world crumbling around them because of words they had been forced to sign. Then my own phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the name attached to the subsequent incoming call made my breath catch. Rosalind Craig, Chloe's godmother, a prominent figure in their social circle, someone who had always been kind to me in a distant, polite way. I hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. I answered. Jennifer? My dear, it's Rosalind Craig. Her voice was warm but laced with shock. I just read the apology online. Jennifer, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Thank you, Rosalind, I said, genuinely surprised. No, dear, I mean it, she insisted. Back then, at the wedding, I asked Mary and Edgar where you were. I knew you'd been unwell. They were so aggressive. They told me you were a pathological liar, that you'd run off in a fit of jealousy to spoil Chloe's day. They were adamant. They made me feel ashamed for even asking. My God, external validation. All these years I'd known what they'd done, but to hear someone else, someone from their world, confirmed their deliberate malicious campaign to discredit me. It was like a missing piece clicking into place. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd actively slandered me to cover their tracks. They were very convincing, I said, my voice tight. Too convincing, Rosalind said sadly. I should have pressed harder. I am so deeply sorry, Jennifer, for not seeing through it, for believing them. Thank you for telling me this, Rosalind. It means more than you know. We spoke for a few more minutes, then hung up. I looked back at the video feed. Mary had lifted her head. Her eyes, swollen and red, met mine through the screen. The hatred in them was palpable, but it was mixed with a raw, desperate plea. The transport team arrived in Chloe's room. Efficient, professional, they began preparing her for the journey. As they were about to wheel her out, Mary stumbled towards the camera, her face contorted. "Will she live?" she whispered, the sound barely carrying. "After all this, will our Chloe live?" I looked at her, at Edgar, at the pale, terrified face of my sister being moved onto a gurney. My revenge was complete. Their public disgrace was absolute. I had kept my part of the bargain. My face remained unreadable. "That's out of my hands now, Mary," I said, my voice cool and steady. "I facilitated the best possible chance for her. I kept my part of the bargain. Whether fate or medicine keeps hers is another matter entirely." I ended the video call, the image of their shattered faces burning in my mind. The silence in my apartment was profound. The taste of vengeance was strong, bitter, and undeniably, satisfyingly complete. Chloe survived, barely. The experimental treatment was brutal, a long, arduous battle that mirrored in an almost poetic and cruel way my own recovery a decade prior. Dr. Armitage's team was incredible, pulling her back from the brink multiple times. I received regular professional updates, clinical and detached. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. The Jennifer Bell Foundation for Patients Abandoned During Medical Crises launched with a significant media splash, fueled by the initial endowment from Mary and Edgar. The story of their public apology linked to the foundation's creation became a cautionary tale whispered in their social circles and reported with thinly veiled disapproval in the local press. Their social standing, once pristine, was in tatters. Financially, they were significantly diminished, though not destitute. The cost of their past had finally come due in public shame and cold, hard cash. Weeks turned into months. Chloe was eventually discharged from Dr. Armitage's unit to a local rehabilitation facility closer to home. I knew this because Kelvin sent me a brief factual email. No please, no thanks, just information. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself driving towards that facility, not out of warmth or any rekindled sisterly affection. It was a need to see, to witness the final outcome of the chain of events I had set in motion. I found her in a small, sunlit room, struggling with a physical therapist to lift a lightweight dumbbell. She was thin, her hair short and patchy, the ghost of her illness still clinging to her, but she was alive. She looked up as I entered, her eyes widening slightly. The therapist, sensing an unspoken tension, quietly excused herself. "Jennifer," Chloe said, her voice weak but clear. "Chloe." An awkward silence stretched between us. The vibrant, entitled sister I remembered was gone, replaced by this fragile, humbled creature. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze dropping to her lap, for giving me a chance. "I upheld my end of an agreement, Chloe," I replied, my voice neutral. "The thanks should go to Dr. Armitage and his team, and to Kelvin for his persistence." She nodded slowly. He's been amazing." Another silence. "Mom and Dad, they're not doing well." "I imagine not," I said. "Public disgrace can be a heavy burden." "They want to see you," she said, finally meeting my eyes. They asked me to ask. They want to try and reconcile. I almost laughed. Reconcile after everything? Did they truly believe that forcing them to face consequences was a prelude to forgiveness? That will not be happening, Chloe, I stated, my voice firm but devoid of anger. The anger had burned out, leaving behind a cold, hard certainty. Tell them that. This wasn't about opening a door for reconciliation. This was about closing a chapter, my chapter, on my terms. She flinched but didn't argue. I understand, she said quietly. Do you? I asked, genuinely curious. Do you understand that this was never just about you being sick? This was about me 10 years ago. This was about reclaiming something that was stolen from me, my dignity, my voice, my truth. Your illness was merely the catalyst that allowed me to do that. She looked down again. I think I'm starting to. I stayed for a few more minutes, a strange, sterile visit. There were no tears, no dramatic pronouncements, just the quiet acknowledgment of a chasm that could never be bridged. As I left, I knew I would likely never see her or my parents again, and for the first time the thought didn't bring pain or anger or even satisfaction. It just was. The cold satisfaction I'd felt initially had settled into something quieter, more profound. It wasn't the fiery triumph I might have fantasized about during those long, lonely years of recovery. It was the cool, clear peace of a debt settled, of justice, however harsh, finally served. The wound, once raw and festering, had been cauterized. The scars would always remain, a road map of my past, but they no longer ached with the same intensity. My life continued. My work thrived. The foundation, a constant public monument to their betrayal and my reclamation, did incredible work, helping people who, like me, had been cast aside in their moment of greatest need. Every grant awarded, every patient supported was a quiet echo of my victory. I learned that some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Some wounds don't heal with platitudes or apologies offered under duress. Sometimes the only path to true peace is to take back your power, to dictate the terms of the reckoning, and to ensure that those who wronged you understand the full weight of their actions. They were no longer the villains in my story, dictating my pain. I had rewritten the narrative. I was not defined by their cruelty, but by my strength in overcoming it, by my refusal to remain a victim. I had faced them, held their fate in my hands, and made them pay. And in doing so, I had finally truly set myself free. The taste of vengeance wasn't sweet, not exactly. It was the taste of a bitter medicine, long overdue, that finally allowed the healing to begin.